Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 53 of B-Road Ballers, the review series for the hot hatch selection of Gran Turismo 6. And in this particular pick we're featuring one of those vehicles which is a hotter hatch, but not necessarily a hot hatch in the traditional sense, because some hatches are really so, not necessarily boring, but so mainstream and so ordinary in their design. They're literally just designed to be cars to get people from A to B, that even when you do make a hot hatch version of them, they're still not really that hot. They're just a little bit more powerful, generally with a slightly larger exhaust tip and a rear wing, and that's about it. And this is kind of one of those cars, but it's a car that has a lot of potential, because we've reviewed a version of this car's lineage on the channel before, and it was a brilliant car. And the car in question is of course the Nissan Micra. Now this is the premium model Micra 12SR, or 12SR, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but it's basically a more powerful version of the modern shape Micra, and it is one of the only Micras and one of the only small Nissans in the game to be a premium model. It's a very cheap car at only just under 18 grand, and it's got a very small, modest engine, a 1.2 turbo. It's front-wheel drive, as you'd probably expect, and it's not exactly the kind of car that would come to many people's mind as a hot hatch. Now the older shape Micra, the version that's on the game in particular called the March G hashtag in particular, is a brilliant car. I reviewed that in the Dark series, and it's one of the best sleeper cars in the game. It is phenomenally quick, mind-bogglingly so in fact, and I love that car. It's completely under the radar and delivers incredible performance. So what about this model? Can it live up to that? Can it modernise that theme? Or is it just all style and no substance? Well, let's see what it offers. For that 1.2 litre engine, you get a pretty decent, it has to be said, 279 horsepower fully tuned. You also get 189 foot-pounds of torque, which isn't bad for such a small motor, and it only weighs in at 839 kilos, which is pretty reasonable. Not as light as it could be, but reasonable enough. It puts out 333 horsepower per tonne, and the maximum PP is 484, which is pretty good. You certainly wouldn't want it to be higher than that. Now, in terms of how competitive this car is, it's quite simply no way near as amazing as the March. That is a phenomenal little car, and there's really no way that this car could match up to that. Even if this vehicle had, say, double the power, it still wouldn't be as shockingly good as the March was. That being said, this isn't a bad car. The handling is pretty decent. It's still a relatively small car, even though it is larger than the older March, and that means that around tight technical circuits or country circuits, such as on this track, it is a useful car. It's got a short wheelbase, not necessarily a super narrow track like a K car, it is wider than that, and it has a kind of overall shape and stance which is similar, not the same as, but similar to stuff like the Daihatsu Storia. Now, it doesn't live up to the Daihatsu Storia. Nothing is similar to the Daihatsu Storia on Gran Turismo. That car is in a league of its own. But having those kind of dimensions is a pretty good place to start. It's lightweight, it's putting out a pretty decent amount of power, especially for a small engine, and it's relatively cheap. Not as cheap as it arguably could be, but still, 18 grand certainly isn't bad for a premium model. It has, as you can see, some visual body upgrades that you can do to it, and so the real question is it worth checking out? And if so, when should you use it? Well, I would say that this car is worth checking out, but not necessarily as a first choice. There are certain vehicles which aren't bad, but they're not necessarily great either. They're the kind of car that I would suggest if you've already got the best choices and you just fancy trying something different, something new, something that it doesn't really matter if it's amazing because you've already got an amazing car and you just want to try something that's an alternative to that. So say you've already got your HPA Golf, you've already got your Focus RS, you've already got your Mini Cooper, your Scirocco R, etc., and you just fancy trying something a little bit unexpected. It's pretty good for that. It's not a pack leader, it's not ahead of the game in any particular way, and it doesn't really bring anything particularly new to the table or fresh in comparison to really any of the other hot hatches in the supermini or larger classes. It's just not that amazing a car, but it's not bad either. It's pretty light, it's reasonably powerful, it has a reasonable PP, and it's not too expensive. So if you are, as I don't think many people are, but if you are by some chance a Micra fan, the new shape one in particular of course, then this is definitely the one to go for. It's the top level Micra of the road car class. So, as I said, if you fancy trying something that's certainly not an obvious choice, but also not the best choice, then you could check out this car. If you're looking purely for victory though, or for a car which will blow you away, like a March or a Storia, then it's just not that kind of car. But I don't think that would really shock anyone to hear that. But overall, that's it for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.